Okay, I'm going to get started by welcoming all of you guys. Welcome to you guys here. Welcome to anyone joining us online as well. This is the first day of our course of Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment. This is where over the next 5 days, I'm going to introduce you to the teachings of the Buddha, helping you to understand and develop a foundation in the path so that you can understand all these foundational teachings to make your way to the enlightened mental state. So welcome to you guys here. Welcome to everyone online as well. What we're going to do to start our course is we're going to start with some meditation. So you guys can do a little bit of meditation. And then after our meditation, I'm going to introduce you to the course and help you guys understand what we're going to be learning over the coming week. And then I will take you into the very first talk, which is helping you to understand the life story of Gotama Buddha. So if you're going to embark on this journey to understand his teachings, it's always nice to understand a bit about his life story. Then we're going to take kind of like a mid-morning break. And when we come back, I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment. So you'll understand what this mental state is that the Buddha guided students to be able to attain. We're going to take a lunch break, probably about an hour and a half. And then we're going to come back and I'm going to teach you guys the chanting so that you guys can learn about the chanting. So if you'd like to join along in the meditation, I am going to start with the chanting. This afternoon, I'm going to teach you how to do it. But for now, I'm just going to do it. And you guys, if you already know the chants, you're welcome to join along. They're on a laminated sheet over there on the table, on the cabinet. If you'd like to see what the chants are, you're welcome to get a chanting sheet. And then this afternoon, I'll teach it to you so you guys know what we're actually doing in the chants and why we chant, the history of chanting. We're actually going to start doing the chants together and helping you to practice to learn how to do the chanting. All of you guys have meditated with me before, so I don't know that I need to give you guys the normal introduction that I do about the chanting and the seated position and all these other things. So I think we'll just jump right into the meditation where I'm going to start with the chanting. I'm going to come in with some guidance. There's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're meditating together. Then we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Mahakavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Namasati Satatawa Manusanam Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that the mind moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Photang Mahakavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti pisu Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. So over the next few days, as we're in this course, I'm going to help you guys build up to a 30-minute meditation session. This was not 30 minutes, but it was a very decent meditation. We probably meditated for a good 20 minutes, but slowly but surely, I'm going to build you guys up to a 30-minute meditation session because that's ultimately where you would like to be. But what I'm going to do now is just introduce you guys to the course so that you'll understand what the course is all about. And then I'm going to share with you guys the life story of Gotama Buddha as a way to get us started. So this course, we're going to start each morning at 9 a.m. and we're going to finish up around 3 p.m. each day. Sometimes a little bit earlier. There's been some situations where a little bit later, but as generally, we're going to be finishing up around 3 o'clock each day. In terms of how the course is structured, each day I'm going to have this particular plan where I'm going to be starting at 9 a.m. with chanting and meditation. So you guys will get used to meditating each morning and kind of building up the momentum as you're going through the course. Then around 9:30, I'm going to start what's called a Dhamma talk, or the way that I think about it is like a discussion. So what I'm going to be doing is sharing with you the teachings of the Buddha to be able to help you to understand what the Buddha actually taught and how to move your mind to enlightenment through training of your mind. Then I will take a mid-morning break, and then we'll come back and we'll have another talk in the kind of late morning before lunchtime. So you'll see that we'll kind of do that each individual day. Then we'll take a lunch somewhere around 12 o'clock. Again, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later, just depends on what we're discussing. And then we take typically an hour and a half lunch. And then we start generally around 1:30, but each time before we go to lunch, I'll let you know what time we're going to start so you know which time to come back. And during your lunch, there's plenty of food around. You can go out and get food. You can come back here. You can eat out at the tables outside. Some people like to come in here and do yoga or even take a nap or something like that. You might even see me doing that from time to time, taking a little nap here in the temple. So feel free to use this space however you like. So during that lunch break, this space will be open. So you can go out if you like, or you can stay here, up to you what you would like to do. Then at 1:30, I'm going to start with another talk on the meditation. This is where in the afternoons, I'm typically teaching some kind of part of the practice, like today is going to be chanting, tomorrow is going to be meditation, breathing mindfulness meditation. Wednesday is going to be a walking meditation. So in the afternoon, we're kind of doing some kind of activity after lunch. Then we generally finish up around 3 o'clock each day. Again, sometimes a little bit earlier, sometimes a little bit later. We're going to do this for 4 days, and this is going to build and culminate into our 5th day, where I'm going to invite you guys out to a field trip if you'd like to go. There's 2 temples that I typically visit. One is a forest temple. One is a temple up on top of the mountain. And after you guys have learned for 4 days here that you understand the teachings of the Buddha, I can take you into temple environments, and I can teach you the artwork, the architecture, the symbolism, so that when you go into temples, the temples kind of mean something to you, and you kind of understand what you're looking at, rather than just like, oh, that's beautiful, oh, that's interesting. You actually understand what the symbolism and the artwork and the architecture is like, so that way when you go visit any temple anywhere, you'll be able to have that background to be able to visit the temple. It's almost like the temple walls speak to you when you understand what the symbolism and the artwork and architecture is, because these people who built these temples 500 to 1,000 years ago, they were embedding certain teachings of the Buddha in the temples. So after learning for 4 days here at this temple, we can go out and visit various temples, and I can teach you guys the various symbolism, artwork, and architecture that you're going to see. So you guys are welcome to come to this. Anybody's welcome to come to this. If you meet people this week that are interested in coming, as long as they're here at 9 o'clock on Friday morning, they'll be able to go out to the field trip. You'll see that over the course of this week, there'll be people coming and going in and out of our course. And you'll see that on Friday, there'll be people that have not even been here at all that'll come in for this particular tour. So you guys are welcome to attend that if you like. In terms of what we're going to be learning, I'm going to be using this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, as the foundational text for our course. You can get this by downloading it from our website. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or if you have access to Amazon, you can get it that way. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be teaching you these chapters, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 19. This is the first volume of a 13-book series, and this is the book that's going to help you to develop your foundation in the path to enlightenment. You can get it in PDF, Kindle, or print versions. So it's really helpful to have this book so that you can be reading either before class or after class. I'm going to be teaching you certain things as part of the course, but there's some things that are in the book that aren't in the actual course. And there's some things that are in the course that aren't in the book. So the combination of reading the chapters and actually coming to the classes, you'll actually benefit from that. So whether you read these chapters before I talk about them, or sometime this week, or starting next week or the week after, it's really helpful to make sure you get fully informed by reading these particular chapters. These are going to help you to be able to fully understand what it is that I'm actually teaching you. Then in terms of what I'm going to teach you over these 5 days is we're going to start off this morning with the life story of Gotama Buddha, because if you're going to embark on this journey to understand his teachings and build a foundation in them, you'd kind of like to know a little bit about his life story. So I'm going to teach that to you here in a moment. Then after our mid-morning break, we'll come back and I'm going to teach you what is enlightenment, because if you're interested in making your way to this enlightened mental state, it's helpful to know what it is. It's kind of like if you were going to go from here to Chiang Rai. If somebody was like, hey, would you like to go to Chiang Rai, which is a city, 3 hours north of here? You're like, I don't know, like what's there? What's it like? What kind of things go on there? You'd be interested to know a bit about it before you even make the decision whether you'd like to go or not. And then once you know a bit about Chiang Rai, you'll be able to more easily navigate your way to it. And once you're there, you'll know that you've actually arrived. So it's the same thing with enlightenment, that if you didn't know what it was, you wouldn't be able to navigate your way to it, and you wouldn't know that you're actually there once you actually arrive. So by understanding what enlightenment is, you'll be able to navigate your way there. You'll be able to know that you've actually attained enlightenment when you've actually attained it. So I'm going to help you guys to understand what that is. Then tomorrow morning, I'm going to start off with the Four Noble Truths, which is part of the Eightfold Path. This is the path to enlightenment. You would need to know this inside and out, backwards and forwards, in order to be able to get to enlightenment. So we're going to take our time and use the entire morning tomorrow to walk you through understanding the Eightfold Path. And I'm going to be using the original words of the Buddha to help you guys understand this. And I'm going to show you how to learn it, how to reflect on it, and how to practice it without any kind of belief whatsoever. Then we're going to go on Wednesday. I'm going to help you to understand what's called transforming the three poisons: craving, anger, and ignorance. The Four Noble Truths is going to give you kind of like a little window into the unenlightened mind, helping you to understand what's going on in the unenlightened mind. But it's the three poisons, which is going to kind of broaden your understanding and deepen your understanding of what's going on in the unenlightened mind. So I'm going to help you guys to understand what that is, and I'm going to help you understand the solutions of how to fix these and uproot these out of the mind, because that's what the Buddha is guiding you to do, is eliminate certain pollutions that are actually in the mind. Then I'm going to teach you the 5 precepts. These are 5 impactful decisions that you could make either wisely or unwisely, and they're either going to produce wholesome results for you or unwholesome results for you. So I'm going to walk you through this, helping you to understand what the Buddha taught on this using his original words, and then I'm going to apply it to today so you can see how to implement these teachings in our environment today and the day-to-day challenges and decisions that you might be making on a day-to-day basis. Then on Thursday, I'm going to teach you what is Gama and how does it affect me. This is a natural law that is affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. There's nothing mystical or magical about it. It's not punishments or rewards. Everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. So we could really say everything that you're learning is part of the natural law of Gama. But we're going to go in on Thursday morning and I'm going to talk about it in detail so you can understand the different types of Gama and how to extinguish your unwholesome Gama, because you've been creating unwholesome Gama up to this point and you're going to need to extinguish that in order to experience improved results in your day-to-day life. So I'm going to teach you what it is and how to actually eliminate your unwholesome Gama. Then I'm going to teach you what is merit and how to get continued support on the path to enlightenment. I'm going to be teaching you this meditation as part of this course. This is where you start off learning meditation, is the breathing mindfulness meditation. This is the primary foundational meditation that the Buddha taught in order to help you get to enlightenment. But there's other things besides meditation that you need as well. I'm going to teach you this in the seated, lying, standing, and walking positions, because you're not going to be able to be in the same position all the time. So I'm going to help you to understand all 4 of these positions. Then we're going to be learning Buddhist chanting. I'm going to help you understand how to actually chant and why we would chant, what the history of chanting is, and actually practice it with you. We're going to do that this afternoon. And then by the time we finish up on Thursday, I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings that you're learning here into your day-to-day life. Because if you come here over the next 5 days and you're learning a bunch of teachings and that's all you do, okay, great. You've learned a certain amount of things. But it's when you integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life that you're actually going to experience the real results. So I'm going to teach you how to integrate what you learned here at the temple into your day-to-day life so you can experience the real results and the real benefits. So do you guys have any questions on any of this here about what it is that we're going to be learning? Anything you guys would like to ask? No? Okay. So I'm going to start off helping you guys to understand this first topic of the life story of Gotama Buddha. This is part of chapter 19 in the book. And I titled this chapter, The Difficult Human Existence, Sickness, Aging, and Death. And you're going to understand why when you hear why the Buddha went on this journey to be able to get to enlightenment, because there's these motivating factors of things that he observed that actually motivated him to go on this journey to get to enlightenment. So you'll understand what sickness, aging, and death is and why that motivated him after I help you guys to understand his life story. This is talked about in chapter 19, if you'd like to read it in chapter 19. The way that I've organized this talk is I'm going to talk about his birth, his early life, his journey to enlightenment, his teaching career, and then we'll talk about the sickness, aging, and death. And as we go throughout the entire course, you guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. I typically stop at different times to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. As you guys probably know from being here, we have the microphones there. If you guys could use those, that way the people online will be able to hear you. If you talked here without a microphone, they wouldn't be able to hear you. And as you get these microphones, you're more than welcome to keep them with you. And I think you guys know that all you need to do is press the gray button, the lights come on, you hold it up to your chin, and then we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online. And then when you're done, if you could just turn it off so that we don't get feedback, that's really helpful as well. And then for anyone who's joining us online, you can ask questions by putting that in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comments section, and I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like, and I'll be able to help you that way. So this individual that we refer to as Gotama Buddha or the Buddha, he was born into a royal family. His mother was a queen. His dad was the king. His name was Siddhartha Gotama. He was born in 563 BC. And during this time frame, if you were a woman and you were pregnant, living with your husband, when you were getting ready to deliver, they would take you back to your homeland so that you could deliver your baby among your family members, like your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, people like this, so they could kind of help you after the baby was born. So the queen, being married to the king, he organized a caravan in order to be able to take his wife back to her homeland so that she could deliver the baby. On her way back to her homeland, in this caravan, she ends up going into labor, and they had to stop the caravan in order for her to get out and actually start to try to have the baby during this journey. So she walks over to this tree, and she's holding on to the branch of a tree, and she's trying to deliver the baby by standing up because the baby couldn't come out of the normal birthing canal. She was trying to get it out, but it wouldn't come out. So the baby ends up breaking through the side of her stomach, and because of this, she ends up dying 7 days later, because 2,500 years ago, they didn't have the medical technology to be able to save her life. Today, we would have just did a C-section and she would have been just fine, but the baby wouldn't come out, so it ends up breaking through the side of her stomach. During this time frame, it was not uncommon for the mother to die during childbirth. So they had protocols in place that if this occurred, if you had brothers and sisters, they would adopt your children as their own. Because if you died and your children lived, they would just have a member of your family adopt your children. So Siddhartha Gautama's mother died 7 days when he was 7 days old, 7 days after his birth. And she had an older sister that adopted him as her own child. So essentially his aunt became his stepmother, and she raised him as her own child. And he was raised inside this royal palace. His father, as part of being the king, it was a common custom that he would summon advisors to come and help him to understand what his son was going to become, kind of like fortune tellers. So he summoned 108 different people to come and let him know what his son was going to become during his life. And 107 of those advisors let him know that your son was going to be a great monarch. He's going to be a great ruler. He's going to rule over your territory, and he's going to expand your territory far and wide. Well, his father, being the king, was like, yeah, that's my boy. Okay, yeah, he's going to expand my territory, right? Well, there's this one advisor who comes in, and he apologizes to the king, and he lets the king know that he's so sorry to deliver this news, that he heard the other advisors, and they are 100% true, that your son is going to be a great leader, but not in the way that you think. He's not going to be a monarch. He's not going to rule over your territory. He's not going to expand your kingdom far and wide. He's going to be a spiritual leader. And his father didn't like this. So he decides he's going to sequester his son in the palace and never let him go outside the palace. Because he thought that if his son went outside the palace, he would get involved in worldly affairs and be interested in being a spiritual leader. But if he could keep him in the palace and kind of get him hooked to the life of a monarch, then perhaps he would do that instead. So his father kept him in the palace for the first part of his life. He lavished him with all the things that you can imagine a rich father could do, being the king. He gave him beautiful entertainment, wonderful entertainment, beautiful women bathing him and taking care of him. He had wonderful food, great fabrics for clothing, everything and anything you can imagine that a rich father could give to their son. He did that for his son, trying to woo him into the ways of being a monarch and being a ruler. So for 29 years, he stays inside the palace, living this life of luxury. And the area that we're talking about is that this was what we refer to as Nepal in Northeast India. He was born in what we refer to as Nepal, and he basically taught and spent time in Northeast India. So in this region of the world, these different kingdoms were set up, and his father was trying to woo him into the ways of being a monarch so that he could rule over this kingdom. Well, at the age of 29, Siddhartha Gotama realizes that he's about to become the king, because during this time frame, you would become the king when you turned age 30. When you were 30, your father would retire. They would be right alongside of you in order to show you how to become a king and be a better and better king. And that's when you would become a king, is when you turn the age 30. So he knew that he was going to become the king soon, but he had never been outside the palace. He had no idea what the kingdom was like. And he felt like, how could I rule over these people if I've never even been outside the palace? So against his father's wishes and without his father knowing, at the age of 29, he goes outside the palace, and he takes with him his royal attendant, kind of like his chief of staff, his main confidant. He goes outside with this individual into the kingdom. And when he goes out into the kingdom, he has what's called the 4 observations. He sees a sickly person, an aging person, a dead corpse, and a roaming ascetic. So when he sees the sickly person, he sees all this disgruntledness around this person. And he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? He's like, oh, those people are upset. They're angry. They're frustrated because their family member is sick and that person can't work and they can't make money, and they're going to have difficulty supporting themselves and having money to pay for food and things like this. And this really had an impact on Siddhartha Gotama because he had never seen this before. He was living this life of luxury in the palace, and if you grew up that way, you'd probably think that everybody lived that way. So when he went outside and he saw this really had an impact on him, that these people were struggling in their day-to-day life. Then he saw an aging person, kind of an older and decrepit person, kind of walking down the street. And again, there was this disgruntledness and frustration with this person. And he had to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? And he's like, the same thing. This person is getting old. They can't take care of themselves. They can't provide for the basic necessities to sustain their life. And then he sees a dead corpse. And he sees the people being sorrowful and grieving and sad about the things that they're experiencing. And then he has to ask his royal attendant, like, what's going on over there? He's like, oh, that's what happens to us at the end of this life. We die. And now these people are going to have difficulties and struggles because of the death of their family member. Once again, they're not going to be able to get the supplies that they need to sustain their life. So he looks at the kingdom as being full of misery and despair, because he lived this life of luxury for 29 years, and he goes out into the kingdom and he sees this misery and despair in the kingdom. And then he sees his 4th observation. He sees a roaming ascetic, someone who's given up worldly life and is going on this journey to be able to understand this sickness, aging, and death, to be able to get to enlightenment. And he has to ask his royal attendant, what's going on with that person over there? And he's like, oh, that person is trying to understand all of this other stuff. They're trying to get to enlightenment, and they're trying to figure out why we keep experiencing sickness, aging, and death, and all this disgruntledness over and over and over again. So Siddhartha Gautama decides that's what he would like to do. That he wasn't interested in ruling over this misery and despair, because that's the way he saw the kingdom, that it was just full of misery and despair. And he wasn't interested in ruling over that. So he ends up going back to the palace. And at this time, he has a wife and he has a young infant child. And he decides that he's going to leave out of the royal palace and go on this journey to be able to get to enlightenment. He didn't understand the mind as much as he did later in life. But at this time, he understood the mind enough that he felt like if he said goodbye, if he woke them up because they were sleeping, it was nighttime, if he woke them up and kissed them and hugged them and told them what he was going to do and left, that he would have difficulties and struggles leaving. So he decided to just go away from the royal palace, and he left them there in the royal palace. And when he left, he took with him his favorite horse, and he took with him his chief of staff, his royal attendant, his chief confidant. And he leaves out of the palace with the horse and this individual. And when he leaves, he eventually gets to the point where he starts shedding these things. He lets his horse go. He lets his royal attendant know that he's been a great help and he can go back and do whatever he needs to do. And he ends up deciding to cut off his hair. At this time, if you were a member of the royal family, you would grow your hair very long. And this is how people would know you're a member of the royal family. Because when you went out into the kingdom and you had this long, beautiful flowing hair, they knew you were part of the royal family, because those of us that were working in the fields and we were doing labor jobs and stuff like this, we weren't able to grow our hair to be long, beautiful, and flowing, because it would get all knotted and tied, knotted up and dirty and mangled looking. It was only the royal family that could sit around with servants to comb their hair, detangle their hair, shampoo their hair. They were the only ones that had the time to be able to sit around and be able to do something like that. So if you went out into the kingdom with this long, beautiful, flowing hair, they knew you were a member of the royal family. Where today, with modern technology, we just take pictures of the king and the queen and we put them all over the kingdom, and then everybody knows who the king and queen is. Where during that time frame, they didn't have that. So they had this long, beautiful, flowing hair so that people knew that you were a member of the royal family. So by him cutting that off after having grown it for 29 years, it's basically like, I'm never going back. I'm never going to assume the throne again, because nobody would ever think that he was actually the king having cut off his hair. Right? So he ends up going forward and getting training with two different teachers. He's trying to train his mind. He's trying to figure out how to get to this enlightened mental state. And there were these two teachers, among others, who were claiming that they had figured out how to get to enlightenment. So he started training with the first one. He trained with them for about an entire year. After that year, the teacher declared Siddhartha Gotama to be a master of his teachings. And he said, you can now teach my teachings. But Siddhartha Gotama realized that his mind wasn't any more peaceful and any more joyful than it was when he was back in the royal palace. Because the teacher was teaching him to hang himself upside down from trees, to lay on beds of nails, to pierce his body with metal implements, to starve himself. They were teaching them to disparage the physical body, that they thought that if you caused harm to the physical body and your mind could overcome that you would then get to enlightenment. So he leaves from this teacher and he goes and studies with another teacher. And this teacher was essentially teaching the similar things. And then after 1 year, this teacher declared that Siddhartha Gotama was a master of his teachings. And he realized that his mind wasn't any more peaceful because he was essentially doing exactly the same things that he was doing with this other teacher. So he's frustrated with this whole thing. For 2 years, he dedicated time to learn these things, and it didn't lead to enlightenment. So he leaves from these teachers and he goes off on a journey by himself into the forest. And the only thing he knows how to do at this time are the things that these teachers taught him. So he continues to do these kinds of things. He starves himself. He takes it so far that he only eats 1 grain of rice per day. And this is what he's doing to try to test this to see if it actually works. So as he was doing this and he was in the forest, he was sitting on the edge of the forest meditating. And there was this mother and young daughter that walks by, and they basically see him and they know that he's about to die because he's like skin and bones. He had taken this so far that he was just eating that 1 grain of rice per day to sustain himself. And they beg and plead with him to eat some more rice, and they offer him some rice. He reluctantly accepts this rice and he starts to eat it. And in this moment, he has a realization. He realizes that when he was in the royal palace, he was living this life of luxury. He had all these sensual pleasures, everything and anything that you could imagine. And that didn't lead to his peacefulness and his joy. But then when he left the royal palace, he swung all the way over to the other side where he was disparaging the body. He was eating 1 grain of rice per day. And he realized that that doesn't lead to enlightenment either. So this is where he starts to understand the middle way, that there's this kind of middle way to approach life. And this is where he starts to eat in moderation. So rather than indulging himself in all these sensual pleasures or just eating 1 grain of rice per day, he starts to eat in moderation. And he gradually, from this point forward, over the next 4 years, figures out how to get to enlightenment. by himself. So a total of 6 years, he figures out how to get to enlightenment. And he knows he's enlightened because his mind is peaceful and is joyful, that he no longer experiences any anger, or sadness, or frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this is completely eliminated from his mind. So he knows he's gotten to enlightenment. And he knows that his teachings that he figured out how to get to enlightenment are radically different than anything anybody else is teaching at the time. And he wasn't quite sure whether or not he was interested in sharing those teachings. And he wasn't quite sure whether the world would actually accept what it was that he had to teach them. So he goes to this particular tree, and he hangs out there for about 7 weeks, contemplating of whether or not he should share his teachings with others. Well, after 7 weeks of spending time at this tree, he ultimately decides that he would like to share his teachings with other people. And he starts making his way back to where he was originally studying with those first 2 teachers. And when he makes his way back to that area, he encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers. And when he encounters them, they start laughing at him. They start joking him. They start mocking him. And by this time, if you're enlightened, that's not going to affect you. But the reason why they were doing this is because they saw he looked bright. He looked radiant. He had meat on his bones. He looked healthy. And to them, in order to get to enlightenment, you needed to be starving the body, that you should be disparaging the body. So when he looked bright and radiant and healthy, they thought he had given up on the path to enlightenment. Because for them, they were hanging themselves upside down from trees. They were starving themselves. They were doing all these disparaging things, and they were looking very unhealthy. So when they saw him coming, they start joking and laughing and mocking him. But by the time you get to enlightenment, that doesn't affect you whatsoever. If someone else is saying negative and degrading things about you, has no effect on your mind whatsoever. So he just walks over to where they're at, these 5 individuals, and he sits down on the ground and he touches the earth. And this is his miracle that he performs. The Buddha performed one and only miracle during his lifetime. And this miracle was that when he touched the earth, the animals came to where he was at. So deer and rabbits and squirrels and birds and snakes and all these animals came rushing to where he was at when he touched the earth. And these 5 individuals were like, okay, you've got our attention. And they decide to sit down and listen to what he has to say. And at that point, he shares with them the 4 noble truths. This is his very first teaching. He explains the problem in the mind. He explains the cause of it, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And because a Buddha's teachings are independently verifiable, those 5 individuals could independently verify what he had to say was the truth. And they could see that he had gotten to enlightenment because he was able to speak in a way that they were able to independently verify that. And this is what I'm going to teach you guys tomorrow morning. If you haven't already learned it before, you're going to hear it for the first time tomorrow, where you can learn the problem, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. And you're going to learn it in a way that you can independently verify it. And you'll be able to see the truth for yourself of what is going on within your own mind and how to actually solve it. So these first 5 people end up becoming his very first 5 students. And from that point forward, people kept learning and growing and developing, and countless people get to enlightenment during his lifetime. In fact, there were so many people that were getting to enlightenment that his community just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. There would be teachers who would come talk to him that they were claiming that they had gotten to enlightenment, and they were talking with the Buddha, trying to convince him that it was their teachings that led to enlightenment. And sometimes those teachers would get angry and frustrated in the conversation, and they would get up and storm off out of the meeting. And they would oftentimes bring their students with them. And their students could see that their teacher wasn't enlightened, and they would end up becoming students of the Buddha. Or sometimes that teacher would talk with the Buddha, and they would have such a discussion, an in-depth discussion, that the teacher would decide to become a student of the Buddha and then bring with them their students. So the Buddha's community just kept growing and growing and growing. That he taught from the age of 35 to the age of 80. he dies at the age of 80. And by the time he dies, countless people has gotten to enlightenment. And they know they've gotten to enlightenment because you know from your own mind that it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Your mind is completely peaceful and joyful, no discontent feelings whatsoever. And you know you've actually gotten to enlightenment. So by the age of 80, when he dies, there's just countless people that have gotten to enlightenment. And then what happens after his death is they end up writing his teachings down to preserve them so that then countless more people could get to enlightenment after his death. And these are the three main criteria of what make a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So Gotama Buddha meets the criteria of what a Buddha is. And a Buddha is very rare in the world. It happens very rarely. The last one that the world's currently aware of was over 2,500 years ago. So Gotama Buddha does all this work to be able to transform his own mind and then help other people accomplish the same thing. It was this sickness, aging, and death that was a motivating factors that motivated him to go off on this journey to get to enlightenment, because he saw all this disgruntledness during these time frames in people's lives. And he ultimately discovers that what's going on is the mind is craving permanence, that if you're craving permanent health, when you're sick, you will experience difficulties and struggles because the mind's not comfortable with that impermanence. Or if you're craving permanent youthfulness, as you age and you're experiencing that change, your mind's not going to like that. You're going to be disgruntled and agitated and frustrated. Or if you're craving permanent life for yourself or for the people around you, then you will struggle when you experience death. So the things around you in the world are constantly changing. This is impermanence, but the mind doesn't understand impermanence. The mind is craving permanence. It's longing, yearning for this permanence. And I'm going to walk you guys through this tomorrow when we learn the Four Noble Truths. But essentially, this is what he figures out. And he figures out that because we are born, we continue to experience sickness, aging, and death. If we eliminate birth, then we won't experience sickness, aging, and death. So not only by getting to enlightenment do you get to enlightenment and your mind's peaceful and joyful, but you won't continue to experience rebirth over and over and over again. This whole topic of rebirth isn't typically something I talk much about in this particular course because this is a foundational course, and anything that's happened in the past, it's in the past. Anything that may or may not happen in the future is in the future. The important thing is to focus on the core central teachings, training your mind to get to enlightenment, but just understand that by getting to enlightenment, somebody not only will experience that peace and joyful mental state, but they won't experience continuous rebirth over and over and over again. So you will have experienced the elimination of your disgruntledness and frustration during these 3 periods of time in your life, and you won't keep experiencing it over and over and over again. There are ways for you to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. Right now, you might not have that wisdom of how to do it, but just understand that that is something that I teach you, how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth as you continue forward in our various programs. So this is the life story of the Buddha that I usually share with students. If you guys have questions, let me know. This particular talk, I usually just go right through it so that you guys can hear everything before I pause and ask for questions. But typically what I do is I teach 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up the questions, teach another 15, 20, 30 minutes, open up for questions. But this topic, it's better to just kind of go all the way through and then open up to questions that you guys might have. So is there anything that you guys would like to ask related to this topic of the life story of the Buddha? Remember, if you guys could use the mics, and then anyone online, if you guys could use Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, putting that in the comment section, or raising your hand in Zoom and asking any questions that you like. Do you guys have any questions you'd like to ask? Hugo, you have a question? Yeah.
We understand the significance of the robes, the dressing that they all use, all the Buddha's monk.
Sure. So during the lifetime of the Buddha, one of the things that he did is he taught you to do what's called elimination of personal existence view. you might have heard me talk about this before, where you realize non-self. And one of the ways to do that is to not project a certain self-image in the world and want other people to see you as being, see this body or see this mind and be perceived in a certain way. So the Buddha wore very simple robes in order to not be glorified and kind of try to look a certain way in the world through holding on or clinging to a certain self-image. So he just wore essentially rag robes as a way to simplify his appearance and not allow his mind to grab on to wanting to appear to others in a certain way. So he just wore the same robes essentially every single day, so his mind wasn't choosing what type of clothes to wear. Because if you think about your life, there's probably times where, maybe not now or maybe in the past, who knows, maybe you still do this now, where you might be starting off your day in the morning and you think about, who am I going to see today? Where am I going to go? And how do I want to look? And now you pick certain clothes based on how you want others to perceive you. You might pick that favorite shirt or that favorite pair of pants or some other item of clothing because the mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And this is because of the personal existence view. But if you just wear the same simple clothes every single day, your mind never gets a chance to do that, and you can get rid of that personal existence view, and then you'll experience more peace and more joy. You don't have to wear simple robes in order to accomplish this. You can wear all white clothes like I wear. You can also just take the clothes that you currently have and you can stack them up, and you can just pick off the top of your stack, and never giving your mind an opportunity to choose what you're going to actually wear that day. You're just picking off the top of your stack. In this way, your mind can get rid of some of that personal existence view. So that's why he wore simple robes, is to train his mind and help the other people to train their mind to not have personal existence view and realize non-self. Yeah, the color comes from the way that they used to dye it. They used herbs and jackfruit and things like this to actually dye it. So it has this like kind of like burnt orange color or this yellowish color. This is what they had during his lifetime. And they kind of essentially boil it in order to make it this particular color. And if you can imagine, during this time frame, things weren't quite as clean as they are nowadays. So they would be sitting on the ground, they'd be sitting in the forest, they'd be sitting different places like this in parks. So if they wore all white like this, it would be a lot more challenging for them to stay clean, sitting down on the ground, on the dirt and stuff like this. So that darker color is kind of better for that kind of environment. You're welcome. I'll just add to this that one time a student came to the Buddha and offered him a fabric, a very rich, very expensive fabric. And the Buddha's practice is to accept the generosity. So he accepted the fabric. And then he turned to one of his students and he said, go rip this up and sew it back together and make a robe out of it. So the Buddha wasn't interested in looking glorified or anything like that. So even when he got this really rich, very expensive fabric, he didn't actually wear it. He ripped it up, and he had somebody rip it up and sew it back together so that he didn't walk around with this glorified fabric looking, so wonderful. And this will help your mind as well. Adrian, you have a question?
I've heard you talk about in relationships, rather than like slowly allow it to like kind of fade away. And when I heard that he just left like his family and like the environment that he had been in for 29 years and just left and went. Because I've had something like that happen in my family as well, where someone just left and just bailed. And I'm just reflecting on craving, desire, attachment with that, like, and like, I don't know, like whether he had like a longing and yearning to like just go in that direction and just leave everything and just abandon like everything that he knew for this mission. Yeah, and I'm just not sure if that's like how that relates to his own craving, desire, attachment for a life beyond what he had.
Yeah, there was probably some of that there, right? Because he wasn't enlightened at that time. So he lacked the wisdom of how to potentially do that in maybe a little bit of a better way. But at that time, that was the best way for him to be able to do it, to be able to get away, right? So he decided to leave abruptly. He left his family in a royal palace, so he didn't like abandon them. And he did end up coming back after 6 years. His family ends up ordaining with him, his son, his wife, his stepmother, his cousins and brothers, and all these different people start to ordain with him and actually learn the teachings that it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. But at that time, being unenlightened, he didn't have the same wisdom that he had later in life to be able to guide people to this enlightened mental state. So he made whatever decision that he made, and then he left. And fortunately he did, because that allowed him to be able to accomplish what he was able to accomplish with his mind, which was getting to this enlightened mental state and discovering these teachings. Had he never left, he wouldn't actually have been able to get to that point where now he helps billions of people over the course of, from when he existed until now. There's been billions of people that have been able to get help from the teachings that he shared. So fortunately, he did do that. And then he did end up coming back so his son and his wife and other people could learn from him. And they ultimately got to enlightenment during their life as well. So him going away was the very best thing he could have done in that situation, to be able to get to the point where he could train his mind. And then he was in a position to be able to help other people to be able to understand how to get to that same mental state. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. So right now it's basically a little bit after 10. It's about 10:15. We can call it 10:15. What I'm going to do is take a little break here, give you guys a chance to go out, get a snack, rest yourself, talk with each other, stretch your legs, whatever it is that you would like to do. I'm going to pick things up in 20 minutes from now, which actually, let's call it 25 minutes from now. Let's just call it 10:40. I'm going to start class where I'm going to teach you guys what is enlightenment. So you'll understand what this mental state is, and that'll help you to more easily navigate your way to it. So enjoy your break, and I'll see you guys at 10:40. Okay. Thank you so much.